In 1943, 3 million people died of starvation in the province of Bengal.
Yeah, it's a staggering number.
It really is. It's an almost incomprehensible loss of human life. But here's the really chilling part.
Okay.
The detail that kind of forces you to rethink everything you assume about survival. There was actually more rice available in the province during the famine than there was 2 years prior,
Wow.
right? A time when people were surviving just fine. So how does a society starve while literally surrounded by food?
I mean, that is the ultimate question right there.
Exactly. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is highly specific. We are taking a foundational text on food security in India, and we're going to read it together, step by step, paragraph by paragraph.
Which I'm really excited about because we often just conflate food security with, simple agriculture.
Yeah, exactly.
We assume that if a seed goes into the ground and a crop is harvested, the problem of hunger is basically solved.
Right, like check the box, we're done.
Exactly. But as that 1943 paradox shows us, the mere existence of calories does not mean people actually live. Food has to be priced, it has to be transported, subsidized, and protected against human economics.
Yeah, so for you listening, here is the format for today. We are going to read the exact original text from the source document, and then we're going to translate it. We're going to unpack it into really simple, beginner-friendly language.
No getting overwhelmed with jargon.
Exactly, just clear, bite-sized aha moments. So let's jump right in. I will read the first verbatim text from our source. Quote, "Food security means availability, accessibility, and affordability of food to all people at all times. The poor households are more vulnerable to food insecurity whenever there is a problem of production or distribution of food crops. Food security depends on the public distribution system, or PDS, and government vigilance and action at times when this security is threatened. What is food security?" End quote.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah, the text immediately drops these three pillars on us, the three A's: availability, accessibility, and affordability.
Right. And what's wild is that condition they attach to it. To all people at all times.
At all times. I mean, that is an uncompromising demand.
It really is, because feeding a population on the day of the harvest, it's relatively easy.
Right, everyone has food that week.
Exactly. The real test of the system is 6 months later, during a drought or a supply chain collapse.
Which is why the text immediately brings in the government.
Yeah.
It mentions the public distribution system, the PDS.
Yeah, it doesn't romanticize the free market at all. It basically says, look, when production or distribution fails, which they will, the government has to be the safety net.
The structural shock absorber. Let's read the next section because it really drills down into those three A's. Quote, "Food is as essential for living as air is for breathing. But food security means something more than getting 2 square meals. Food security has following dimensions. A, availability of food means food production within the country, food imports, and the previous year's stock stored in government granaries. D, accessibility means food is within reach of every person. C, affordability implies that an individual has enough money to buy sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet one's dietary needs. Thus, food security is ensured in a country only if, one, enough food is available for all the person's food. All persons have the capacity to buy food of acceptable quality, and as third, there is no barrier on access to food." End quote.
Okay, so to really visualize how those three dimensions interact, let's use an analogy. Let's think of a supermarket.
Okay, I like that.
So availability. That's simply whether the supermarket actually has groceries on the shelves.
Right. The text says it's about what we produce, what we import, and what we have stored from last year. So the store has to have inventory.
Exactly. Now, accessibility. That means the supermarket is actually in your neighborhood.
Okay.
Right? If the store is full of food, but it's a 10-hour drive away and you don't have a car, it's useless to you. The text says within reach, with no barrier on access.
Yeah, which could be a physical mountain.
Yeah.
Or a systemic barrier like discrimination.
Exactly. And then the third pillar, affordability. The store is nearby, the shelves are full, but do you actually have money in your wallet to buy the food?
And not just any food. The text is super specific here.
Right. It says sufficient, safe, and nutritious.
Yeah, of acceptable quality.
Yeah.
So throwing, expired empty calories at people doesn't fulfill the definition of food security.
No, it doesn't. You're just delaying starvation at that point. It has to support actual health.
Okay, so when one of those pillars falls, the whole thing crashes. And the text goes into exactly how that happens, how a famine actually forms. So here's the third verbatim read. Quote, "Why food security? The poorest section of the society might be food insecure most of the times, while persons above the poverty line might also be food insecure when the country faces a national disaster or calamity like earthquake, drought, flood, tsunami, widespread failure of crops causing famine, etc. How is food security affected during a calamity? Due to a natural calamity, say drought, total production of food grains decreases. It creates a shortage of food in the affected areas. Due to shortage of food, the prices goes up. At the high prices, some people cannot afford to buy food. If such calamity happens in a very widespread area or is stretched over a longer time period, it may cause a situation of starvation. A massive starvation might take a turn of famine. A famine is characterized by widespread deaths due to starvation and epidemics caused by forced use of contaminated water or decaying food and loss of body resistance due to weakening from starvation." End quote.
Okay, that is dark, but it's a terrifyingly logical domino effect.
It really is. It shifts from an environmental trigger straight into economics and then into biological collapse.
Right. The first domino is the drought, the physical calamity.
Production drops.
Exactly. Which knocks over the second domino, the localized shortage. But here's the critical part. The mechanism that actually kills people is the third domino.
The price spike. Because supply drops, but demand doesn't. People still have to eat.
So prices absolutely skyrocket.
Okay, so I want to push back on this, or at least ask a question here.
Sure.
It sounds like starvation isn't always caused by a lack of food overall, but by a sudden spike in price. So is famine actually an economic problem rather than an agricultural one?
That is exactly what this text is revealing, yes.
Ah.
It's a financial wall. The food might literally be sitting in the local market, but if you can't afford it, it might as well not exist.
Wow. And then the text explains what happens when you hit that wall, the biological definition of famine.
Right, and notice it's not just people starving to death directly. It specifically mentions epidemics.
Epidemics, yeah. Loss of body resistance.
Because the human body is an engine. When you run out of calories, your immune system just shuts down to conserve energy.
So you're defenseless.
Totally defenseless. And out of desperation, people start drinking contaminated water or eating decaying food, so they ingest pathogens right when their immune system is offline.
So it's cholera or dysentery that causes the massive death tolls.
Exactly. It's the epidemics that characterize a true famine.
Which brings us right back to the chilling statistic from the intro, the tragedy of Bengal. Let's read the next section from the text, which gives us the actual data on this. Quote, "The most devastating famine that occurred in India was the famine of Bengal in 1943. This famine killed 30 lakh people in the province of Bengal. Do you know who were affected the most by the famine? The agricultural laborers, fishermen, transport workers, and other casual laborers were affected the most by dramatically increasing price of rice. They were the ones who died in this famine." End quote. And then the text provides table 4.1.
Oh, right. The data table on rice production?
Yeah, so let me read you these numbers. It shows the total availability of rice in Bengal. In 1938, it was 85 lakh tons. In 1941, it dropped to 70 lakh tons.
And 1941 was not a famine year.
Right. But then in 1943, the year 30 million people died, the availability was 79 lakh tons.
What's absolutely fascinating here is that the availability in 1943 was higher than in 1941.
By 9 lakh tons.
Exactly. They had the calories. The famine was not strictly about a lack of rice.
It was the soaring prices.
Yes. The text explicitly points out the victims: agricultural laborers, fishermen, casual workers.
People who don't grow their own food.
Right. They buy their food with daily wages. And when wartime inflation and hoarding hit, the price of rice exploded. Suddenly, their daily wage bought a fraction of what they needed. The market simply priced them to death.
That completely changes how you look at hunger. And this realization actually caused a massive shift in how the whole world views food security. Let's read the next paragraph about that shift. Quote, "In the 1970s, food security was understood as the availability at all times of adequate supply of basic foodstuffs, UN 1975. Amartya Sen added a new dimension to food security and emphasized the access to food through what he called entitlements, a combination of what one can produce, exchange in the market, along with state or other socially provided supplies. Accordingly, there's been a substantial shift in the understanding of food security. The 1995 World Food Summit declared, food security at the individual, household, regional, national, and global levels exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life." CEFAO 1996, page 3. The declaration further recognizes that poverty eradication is essential to improve access to food. End quote.
Okay, so Amartya Sen's concept of entitlements, this is huge.
Yeah, let's break this down. Because before him, people just looked at the national grain silos.
Right, if the silos were full, the UN said you were food secure. But Sen looked at Bangsal and said, who cares if the silo is full if you don't have the key to open it?
Exactly. So he introduces this word, entitlements. And I want to make sure we explain it simply because it's not a political buzzword here.
No, it's an economic bundle.
Right. An entitlement is essentially your survival portfolio. It's the total sum of legitimate ways you can get food.
And the text gives us the three parts of that portfolio. First, what you can produce. So if you own a farm and grow wheat, that wheat is your direct entitlement.
Okay, making sense.
Second, what you can exchange in the market. That's your labor, your wages. If I'm a carpenter, I trade my skills for cash and trade that cash for bread. That's my exchange entitlement.
And the third part?
State supplies, the safety net, what the government provides you.
So if you don't own land and inflation destroys the value of your wages and the government doesn't help you,
Your entitlement drops to zero, and you starve, even if you are standing next to a mountain of grain.
wow. Which is why the 1995 summit changed the definition to say that poverty eradication is essential.
Because if you have no money, you're economically invisible to the food market.
Okay, so if it's all about this economic portfolio, who are the people failing this equation? Our text actually categorizes them. Let's read the next section. Quote, who are food insecure? Although a large section of people suffer from food and nutrition insecurity in India, the worst affected groups are landless people with little or no land to depend upon, traditional artisans, providers of traditional services, petty self-employed workers, and destitutes, including beggars. In the urban areas, the food insecure families are those whose working members are generally employed in ill-paid occupations and casual labor market. These workers are largely engaged in seasonal activities and are paid very low wages that just ensure bare survival. End quote.
So we have a really clear rural versus urban divide here.
Let's translate that. In rural areas, your vulnerability is completely tied to dirt, to land ownership.
Exactly. If you're landless, you have no direct entitlement, you can't grow anything, you're totally dependent on selling your labor to the people who do own the land.
And the text also mentions traditional artisans.
Yeah, because as the world modernizes, the market value for traditional rural services just drops, so their exchange entitlement evaporates.
But then in the city, the urban areas, it's different. It's not about land.
Right, urban vulnerability is all about the casual labor market.
The gig economy, basically.
Yeah.
Ill-paid, no contracts, no safety net.
And wages that only ensure bare survival, which means zero savings. You have no buffer for an emergency.
To really drive this home, the textbook gives us two specific stories. Case studies. Let's look at them side by side. Here's the first one, verbatim. Quote, Story of Ramu. Ramu works as a casual laborer in agriculture in Raipur village. His eldest son, Somu, who's 10 years old, also works as a pali to look after the cattle of the sarpanch of the village, Satpal Singh. Somu is employed for the whole year by the sarpanch and is paid a sum of Rs 1,000 for this work. Ramu has 3 more sons and 2 daughters, but they are too young to work on the field. His wife Sonhari is also working as house cleaner for the livestock, removing and managing cow dung. She gets half-liter milk and some cooked food along with vegetables for her daily work. Besides, she also works in the field along with her husband in the busy season and supplements his earnings. Agriculture, being a seasonal activity, employs Ramu only during times of sowing, transplanting, and harvesting. He remains unemployed for about 4 months during the period of plant consolidation and maturing in a year. He looks for work in other activities. Sometimes he gets employment in bricklaying or in construction activities in the village. By all his efforts, Ramu is able to earn enough, either in cash or kind, for him to buy essentials for 2 square meals for his family. However, during the days when he is unable to get some work, he and his family really face difficulties, and sometimes his small kids have to sleep without food. Milk and vegetables are not a regular part of meals in the family. Ramu is food insecure during 4 months when he remains unemployed because of the seasonal nature of agriculture work. End quote.
So Ramu's story perfectly illustrates rural vulnerability.
It really does. It's all about seasonal unemployment.
Right. Agriculture isn't a factory. It doesn't run 204/7. It has biological seasons.
You sow, you transplant, you harvest.
And in between all that, the crop is just growing on its own. The text calls it plant consolidation. And during that time, nobody needs Ramu's labor.
For 4 whole months, his exchange entitlement is just gone.
Completely gone. He has to scramble for construction work just to survive.
And his whole family is hustling. His 10-year-old son earns a tiny bit of cash. His wife gets paid in milk and food for managing livestock waste.
But when that secondary construction work dries up, the kids sleep hungry, it's totally dictated by the seasons.
Okay, so keep Ramu's seasonal struggle in mind. Now let's read the second case study about the urban environment. Quote, Story of Maud. Ahmad is a rickshaw puller in Bangalore. He is shifted from Jumri Talia along with his 3 brothers, 2 sisters, and old parents. He stayed in a huggy. The survival of all members of his family depends on his daily earnings from pulling rickshaw. However, he does not have a secured employment, and his earnings fluctuate every day. During some days, he gets enough earning for him to save some amount after buying all his day-to-day necessities. On other days, he barely earns enough to buy his daily necessities. However, fortunately, Ahmad has a yellow card, which is PDS card for below poverty line people. With this card, Ahmad gets sufficient quantity of wheat, rice, sugar, and kerosene oil for his daily use. He gets these essentials at half of the market price. He purchases his monthly stock during a particular day when the ration shop is open for below poverty people. In this way, Ahmad is able to eke out his survival with less than sufficient earnings for his big family, where he is the only earning member. End quote.
Ahmad's situation's entirely different.
Yeah, he's not waiting on a 4-month harvest gap. His risk is daily volatility.
Exactly. Pulling a rickshaw means his income depends on the weather, his health, just random customer demand. And he's supporting this massive multi-generational family.
It sounds impossible. But the text highlights this one crucial intervention that Ramu didn't have.
The yellow BPL PDS card, the below poverty line card.
Right. And how does that change his entitlement?
It artificially stabilizes his volatile earnings. Even on days when nobody rides his rickshaw, that card guarantees he can buy a baseline amount of wheat, rice, and kerosene at half the market price.
So the government is basically stepping in and acting as a floor.
Yeah.
They're artificially suppressing the price of his core calories.
Without that intervention, his family would constantly be slipping into severe caloric deficit.
It shows how a government program can literally construct an entitlement for someone when the free market fails them. Okay, so we've looked at the individual level. Now the text zooms out to map this across society. Let's read this section on social composition. Quote, the social composition, along with the inability to buy food, also plays a role in food insecurity. The SCs, STs, and some sections of the OBCs, lower castes among them, who have either poor land base or very low land productivity, are prone to food insecurity. The people affected by natural disasters who have to migrate to other areas in search of work are also among the most food insecure people. A high incidence of malnutrition prevails among women. This is a matter of serious concern as it puts even the unborn baby at the risk of malnutrition. A large proportion of pregnant and nursing mothers and children under the age of 5 years constitute an important segment of the food insecure population. According to the National Health and Family Survey 1998-99, the number of such women and children is approximately 11 crore.
The food insecure people are disproportionately large in some regions of the country, such as economically backward states with high incidence of poverty, tribal and remote areas, regions more prone to natural disasters, etc. In fact, the states of Uttar Pradesh, eastern and southeastern parts, Bihar, Jharkhand, Orissa, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, parts of Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra account for the largest number of food insecure people in the country. End quote.
This paragraph is really heavy because it connects historical inequality straight to modern biology.
Yeah, it explicitly names scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and sections of other backward classes.
And it links their vulnerability directly to having a poor land base. Because remember, rural entitlement comes from land. If your community has been historically excluded from owning land, you are inheriting a fractured entitlement.
Your starting line is just way behind everyone else's. And the biological impact of that is staggering. The text says 11 crore, that's 110 million malnourished women and children.
And notice the emphasis on the unborn baby. It's an intergenerational cycle.
Right, if a pregnant mother doesn't have the entitlement to get enough food, the baby develops in a deficit.
Exactly. So the child is born with stunted physical or cognitive capacities, which means when they grow up, they can't compete as well in the labor market.
So they earn less, their entitlement shrinks, and the cycle repeats.
And it's geographically concentrated too. Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, places with compounding issues like remoteness or natural disasters.
So, this compounding nature of poverty brings us to a really profound part of the text. It redefines what hunger actually is. Let's read this verbatim. Quote, hunger is another aspect indicating food insecurity. Hunger is not just an expression of poverty, it brings about poverty. The attainment of food security, therefore, involves eliminating current hunger and reducing the risks of future hunger. Hunger has chronic and seasonal dimensions. Chronic hunger is a consequence of diets persistently inadequate in terms of quantity and/or quality. Poor people suffer from chronic hunger because of their very low income and, in turn, inability to buy food even for survival. Seasonal hunger is related to cycles of food growing and harvesting. This is prevalent in rural areas because of the seasonal nature of agricultural activities and in urban areas because of casual laborers. For example, there is less work for casual construction laborers during the rainy season. This type of hunger exists when a person is unable to get work for the entire year." End quote.
That one sentence, hunger, is not just an expression of poverty, it brings about poverty. That is a total paradigm shift.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because we usually think, you're poor, therefore you go hungry. Hunger is the tragic result.
But the text is saying, no, hunger is the input. It's the engine of future poverty.
Let's use an analogy here. Think of the human body like a car. To drive the car to work, to earn a paycheck, you have to put gas in it first.
Exactly. The calories are the gas. If you have what the text calls chronic hunger, your gas tank is permanently hovering around empty.
You literally don't have the metabolic energy to do the grueling physical labor needed to earn the money to buy the food.
It's a metabolic trap. Your biological deficit prevents you from earning, which guarantees your deficit continues.
But the text separates that from seasonal hunger.
Right, which is what Ramu had. Seasonal hunger isn't a constant daily degradation of the body. It's just a predictable gap.
Yeah.
The harvest ends or the monsoon stops construction work.
So the solutions had to be different.
Yeah.
You can fix seasonal hunger with a temporary loan or a short-term job, but chronic hunger requires basically rebuilding a person's entire permanent entitlement.
You have to intervene at a massive systemic level.
Which is exactly what the Indian government tried to do. This brings us to the historical turning point, the Green Revolution. Let's read about the pursuit of self-sufficiency. Quote, "India is aiming at self-sufficiency in food grains since independence. After independence, Indian policymakers adopted all measures to achieve self-sufficiency in food grains. India adopted a new strategy in agriculture, which resulted in Green Revolution, especially in the production of wheat and rice. Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of India, officially recorded the impressive strides of Green Revolution in agriculture by releasing a special stamp entitled Wheat Revolution in July 1968. The success of wheat was later replicated in rice. The increase in food grains was, however, disproportionate. The highest rate of growth was achieved in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, which was 58 and 33 million tons in 2020 to 21. The total food grain production was 310 million tons in 2020 to 21, and it has changed to 315 million tons in 2021 to 22. Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh recorded a significant production in field of wheat, which was 36 and 18 million tons in 2020 to 21, respectively.
West Bengal and UP, on the other hand, recorded significant production of rice, 17 and 16 million tons in 2020 to 21, respectively. Since the advent of the Green Revolution in the early 1970s, the country has avoided famine even during adverse weather conditions. India has become self-sufficient in food grains during the last 30 years because of a variety of crops grown all over the country." End quote.
So here's where it gets really interesting. You have to think about the mindset of the country after that 1943 Bengal famine.
Right, the trauma of that.
The absolute political imperative was that India could never again rely on anyone else for basic survival.
And the Green Revolution was the answer. High-yield seeds, irrigation, chemical fertilizers.
Forcing the land to produce more. And it worked so well that Indira Gandhi released a literal postage stamp called Wheat Revolution in 1968.
The stamp, that's broadcasting to every citizen in the country that famine is officially canceled.
Exactly. And the data backs it up, pushing past 310 million tons of food grain. But the text throws in a really big caveat here.
Yeah, the growth was disproportionate.
Right. It wasn't a magic wand that blessed the whole country equally. It worked in places that already had good water and infrastructure. Punjab, UP, Madhya Pradesh, they became the engines for the whole country.
But the bottom line is, they achieved the first pillar. The availability reservoir was full. They haven't had a famine since the 70s.
But as we know from Amartya Sen, a full reservoir doesn't mean anything if the plumbing is broken.
Right, if people can't access it or afford it. So the government had to build the plumbing. And that is a massive economic machine. Let's read about how they actually manage this. Quote, "The availability of food grains, even in adverse weather conditions or otherwise, at the country level has further been ensured with a carefully designed food security system by the government. This system has two components, A, buffer stock, and B, public distribution system." What is buffer stock? Buffer stock is the stock of food grains, namely wheat and rice, procured by the government through the Food Corporation of India, or FCI. The FCI purchases wheat and rice from the farmers in states where there is surplus production. The farmers are paid a pre-announced price for their crops. This price is called minimum support price, or MSP. The MSP is declared by the government every year before the sowing season to provide incentives to farmers for raising the production of these crops. The purchased food grains are stored in granaries. Do you know why this buffer stock is created by the government? This is done to distribute food grains in the deficit areas and among the poorer strata of the society at a price lower than the market price, also known as issue price. This also helps resolve the problem of shortage of food during adverse weather conditions or during the periods of calamity." End quote.
Okay, this is the beating heart of the whole system.
The buffer stock and the PDS.
And it all relies on balancing two massive economic levers, the MSP and the issue price.
Let's break down MSP simply, because it's brilliant behavioral economics. Minimum support price. The text says it's declared before the sowing season.
That's the key. Before the farmer even buys a seed, the government promises them a guaranteed price.
It's basically the ultimate insurance policy.
Exactly. Farming is super risky. If everyone has a great harvest, the market gets flooded, prices crash, and you go bankrupt. But MSP says, go ahead, plant as much as you possibly can. Don't worry about the market crashing. We will buy it from you at this profitable price.
So that incentive creates the massive surplus they need to fill the government granaries, the FCI.
Right, but now the government has all this expensive grain. What do they do with it?
They sell it to the vulnerable consumers, but they have to protect the consumer too.
Which is where the issue price comes in. The government sells that grain out of the buffer stock at a price much lower than the open market.
So they buy high from the farmer and sell low to the poor.
Yes. The government acts as this massive financial pressure valve. They deliberately take a financial loss to absorb the chaos of the market.
They absorb the volatility that caused the Bengal famine. That is amazing. But actually getting that cheap grain to the people requires physical shops. Let's read about the scale of the retail network. Quote, "What is the public distribution system? The food procured by the FCI is distributed through government-regulated ration shops among the poorer section of the society. This is called the public distribution system, or PDS. Ration shops are now present in most localities, villages, towns, and cities. There are about 5.5 lakh ration shops all over the country. Ration shops, also known as fair price shops, keep stock of food grains, sugar, and kerosene for cooking. These items are sold to people at a price lower than the market price. Any family with a ration card can buy a stipulated amount of these items, example 35 kilograms of grains, 5 liters of kerosene, 5 kilograms of sugar, etc., every month from the nearby ration shop. The introduction of rationing in India dates back to the 1940s against the backdrop of the Bengal famine. The rationing system was revived in the wake of an acute food shortage during the 1960s, prior to the Green Revolution. In the wake of the high incidence of poverty levels, as reported by the NSSO in the mid-1970s, 3 important food intervention programs were introduced. Public Distribution System, PDS, for food grains, in existence earlier but strengthened thereafter. Integrated Child Development Services, ICDS, introduced in 1975 on an experimental basis, and Food for Work, FFW, introduced in 1977 to 78. Over the years, several new programs have been launched. While some of the programs such as PDS, midday meals, etc. are exclusively food security programs, most of the poverty alleviation programs also enhance food security. Employment programs greatly contribute to food security by increasing the income of the poor." End quote.
I mean, just pause on that number. 5.5 lakh ration shops.
That's 550,000 retail locations.
It might be the largest retail network on Earth, and it's entirely dedicated to human survival.
And its lineage traces straight back to the Bengal famine in the 40s. But I love how the text tracks the evolution of these programs.
Right. They got more sophisticated over time. The PDS handles the bulk calories for the family. But then you have ICDS, which specifically targets the nutrition of infants and mothers.
And the midday meal scheme, which feeds kids while giving them an incentive to actually go to school.
And don't forget the Food for Work programs. The text says employment programs increase the income of the poor, which enhances food security.
Which is pure Amartya Sen. They are using government resources to artificially build and exchange entitlement.
Exactly, giving them purchasing power.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. Operating a massive universal subsidy like this is incredibly expensive.
Right, so they had to shift their approach. They had to start targeting. Let's read this next section on the modern legislation. Quote, "The National Food Security Act, 2013. This act provides for food and nutritional security life at affordable prices and enables people to live a life with dignity. Under this act, 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population have been categorized as eligible households for food security. Current status of public distribution system. Public distribution system is the most important step taken by the government of India towards ensuring food security. In the beginning, the coverage of PDS was universal, with no discrimination between the poor and the non-poor. Over the years, the policy related to PDS has been revised to make it more efficient and targeted. In 1992, revamped Public Distribution System, RPDS, was introduced in 1,700 blocks in the country. The target was to provide the benefits of PDS to remote and backward areas. From June 1997, in a renewed attempt, Targeted Public Distribution System, TPDS, was introduced to adopt the principle of targeting the poor in all areas. It was for the first time that a differential price policy was adopted for poor and non-poor. Further, in 2000, two special schemes were launched, viz. Antodaya Anna Yojana, AAY, and Annapurna Scheme, APS, with special target groups of poorest of the poor and indigent senior citizens, respectively. The functioning of these two schemes was linked with the existing network of the PDS. End quote.
Okay, that is an absolute alphabet soup of acronyms.
It really is. TPDS, AAY, APS. But let's break down the actual ideological shift here.
Right, so initially the PDS was universal. Everyone got the same discount.
Which sounds fair, right?
It sounds fair, but it meant the government was spending massive amounts of money subsidizing food for wealthy landowners who didn't actually need it.
Ah, right. So they shifted from universal to targeted.
Exactly. The big pivot was in 1997 with the targeted PDS, or TPDS. They introduced a differential price policy. Basically, they split people into above poverty line and below poverty line.
BPL and APL.
Mm.
And then in 2000, they realized even that wasn't specific enough.
Right, because poverty is a spectrum.
Yep.
So they created the AY cards for the poorest of the poor, the people at the absolute bottom who need food basically for free.
And all this eventually gets codified into law with the 2013 National Food Security Act, covering huge chunks of the population.
On paper, it's a triumph. But whenever you build a bureaucracy this massive, you generate paradoxes and incredible friction. The text does not hold back on the failures here.
Let's read the critique. This is where it gets really messy. Quote, "The PDS has proved to be the most effective instrument of government policy over the years in stabilizing prices and making food available to consumers at affordable prices. It has been instrumental in averting widespread hunger and famine by supplying food from surplus regions of the country to the deficit ones. In addition, the prices have been under revision in favor of poor households in general. The system, including the minimum support price and procurement, has contributed to an increase in food grain production and provided income security to farmers in certain regions. However, FCI godowns are overflowing with grains, with some rotting away and some being eaten by rats. There is a general consensus that high level of buffer stocks of food grains is very undesirable and can be wasteful. The storage of massive food stocks has been responsible for high carrying costs, in addition to wastage and deterioration in grain quality. Freezing of MSP for a few years should be considered seriously." End quote.
The whiplash in that paragraph is wild.
Seriously. It praises the system for stopping famines, and then right in the next breath,
Rats are eating overflowing, rotting grain in government warehouses.
while people are still malnourished. It's the ultimate tragic irony.
It's a systemic paradox.
Yeah.
Because the government guarantees they will buy everything the farmer grows at the MSP, a tsunami of grain hits the FCI every year.
Way more than they can physically store safely.
And storing biological material is expensive. The text calls it carrying costs. You need infrastructure, pest control, security.
And if the grain doesn't flow smoothly out to the ration shops, it just sits there and rots. The state is literally spending a fortune to watch its investment decay.
Which is why the text suggests something incredibly radical at the end. It says, freeze the MSP.
Stop the incentive engine.
Right. Basically saying, look, we've over-indexed and protecting the producer, and it's creating colossal waste. We need to hit pause.
But the waste isn't the only side effect. The MSP also accidentally wrecked the environment and traditional diets. Let's read this next part. Quote, "The increased food grains procurement at enhanced MSP is the result of the pressure exerted by leading food grain producing states, such as Punjab, Haryana, and Andhra Pradesh. Moreover, as the procurement is concentrated in a few prosperous regions, Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, and to a lesser extent in West Bengal, and mainly of 2 crops, wheat and rice increase in MSP, has induced farmers, particularly in surplus states, to divert land from production of coarse grains, which is the staple food of the poor, to the production of rice and wheat. The intensive utilization of water in the cultivation of rice has also led to environmental degradation and fall in the water level, threatening the sustainability of the agricultural development in these states, end quote.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's devastating.
Because if the government guarantees a high price for wheat and rice, human nature takes over.
Obviously, every farmer is going to stop growing whatever they used to grow and just chase the guaranteed money of wheat and rice.
But the text says they diverted land away from coarse grains. What does that mean for the average person?
Coarse grains are things like millets or sorghum. They are highly nutritious, they don't need much water, and historically they are the cheap, staple food of the poorest people.
Oh, wow. So by guaranteeing high prices for wheat and rice, the government accidentally wiped out the traditional food of the poor.
Yes. And it gets worse. Look at the environmental impact. The text mentions the intensive utilization of water for rice.
Right.
They incentivized farmers in semi-arid places like Punjab to grow rice, which is essentially a swamp plant and needs crazy amounts of water.
So they pumped the water table dry.
Exactly. The very policy meant to secure the future of food is actively destroying the land and water needed to grow it.
And then on top of all that systemic misalignment, you have good old-fashioned corruption at the retail level. Let's read the section on PDS dealer malpractices. Quote, PDS dealers are sometimes found resorting to malpractices like diverting the grains to open market to get better margin, selling poor quality grains at ration shops, irregular opening of the shops, etc. It is common to find that ration shops regularly have unsold stocks of poor quality grains left. This has proved to be a big problem. When ration shops are unable to sell, a massive stock of food grains piles up with the SCI. In recent years, there is another factor that has led to the decline of the PDS. Earlier, every family, poor and non-poor, had a ration card with a fixed quota of items such as rice, wheat, sugar, etc. These were sold at the same low price to every family. The three types of cards and the range of prices that you see today did not exist. A large number of families could buy food grains from the ration shop subject to a fixed quota. These included low-income families whose incomes were marginally higher than the below-poverty-line families. Now, with TPDS of three different prices, any family above the poverty line gets very little discount at the ration shop. The price for APL family is almost as high as open market price, so there is little incentive for them to buy these items from the ration shop, end quote.
This is where the pipeline really clogs up. The local PDS dealer.
Right. They receive this highly subsidized, decent quality grain from the government, and the temptation is just too much.
Why sell it cheap at the ration shop when you can secretly divert it to the open market and pocket the huge profit margin?
And then what do they sell in the ration shop?
The text says they sell poor quality grains or they just randomly keep the shop closed.
So if you're the consumer, you're faced with rotting grain or a closed door, you just stop going.
Exactly. And that creates a feedback loop. If the dealer isn't selling their bad stock, they don't order new stock from the FCI.
Which means the grain backs up in the system, sits in the warehouse, and the rats eat it.
It's a massive chain reaction of inefficiency. But the text also points out a structural flaw with the targeted system, the TPDS.
Right, the prices for the above poverty line, the APL families.
In the old system, everyone got a discount. Even families just barely above the poverty line had a reason to use the ration shop.
But now, the APL price is basically the same as the regular open market.
So if you're an APL family, why would you deal with a corrupt ration shop with terrible grain when you can just go to the normal market for the same price?
You wouldn't. So they all leave the system.
Leaving only the absolute poorest people using it, which just further shrinks the amount of grain the system can move. It's a perfect storm.
Okay, so we've seen the incredible scale, but also the massive corruption and inefficiency of this top-down bureaucracy, which is why the text concludes with an alternative. Let's read the final section about local solutions. Quote, role of cooperatives in food security. The cooperatives are also playing an important role in food security in India, especially in the southern and western parts of the country. The cooperative societies set up shops to sell low-priced goods to poor people. For example, out of all fair-priced shops running in Tamil Nadu, around 94% are being run by the cooperatives. In Delhi, Mother Dairy is making strides in provision of milk and vegetables to the consumers at controlled rate decided by Government of Delhi. Amul is another success story of cooperatives in milk and milk products from Gujarat. It has brought about the white revolution in the country. These are a few examples of many more cooperatives running in different parts of the country, ensuring food security of different sections of society. Similarly, in Maharashtra, Academy of Development Science, ADS, has facilitated a network of NGOs for setting up grain banks in different regions. ADS organizes training and capacity building programs on food security for NGOs. end quote.
So this is a total architectural shift. From top-down government mandates to bottom-up community power.
Right. The cooperative, for anyone who doesn't know, a cooperative isn't a government agency and it's not a private corporation.
It's an enterprise owned and democratically run by its own members.
The people who actually use it. And the scale here is surprising. 94% of fair price shops in Tamil Nadu are run by cooperatives.
Which basically bypasses that corrupt individual dealer model we were just talking about.
And then they mention Amul.
Amul is the gold standard example. It's millions of small-scale milk producers in Gujarat. Instead of getting ripped off by corporate middlemen, they banded together.
They created their own cooperative to process and distribute the milk.
And it was so successful, it sparked the White Revolution, making India self-sufficient in milk, just like the Green Revolution did for wheat. But they did it through decentralized local economics.
I really love the final example, too. The ADS grain banks in Maharashtra.
Yeah, that is hyper-local entitlement.
Instead of the national government buying grain in Punjab, shipping it thousands of miles away to sit in a warehouse, and then trying to push it down a corrupt retail chain.
The local community just manages its own surplus.
Right. They have a physical grain bank in the village. If there's a bad harvest, you just withdraw grain from your own community's reserve.
It's immune to the national bottlenecks. It empowers the most vulnerable to engineer their own security.
It proves that human survival doesn't always have to rely on a monolithic state structure.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to the end of our source text. I want to thank you, the listener, for sticking with us today. Reading a dense textbook paragraph by paragraph requires a lot of patience, but honestly, it yields a clarity that simple summaries just can't give you.
Definitely.
We started with the simple theory of the 3 A's: availability, accessibility, affordability.
And then we saw how those pillars completely collapsed during the Bengal famine, proving that hunger is really a failure of economics.
Right. We looked at Ramu's rural seasonal hunger and Ahmad's daily urban volatility. We traced the massive triumph of the Green Revolution.
And stared right at the tragic paradox of rotting buffer stocks, depleted water tables, and corrupt pipelines.
Before finally ending on the hopeful note of local cooperatives building resilient networks of survival.
You know, the text reveals a system that is breathtaking in its scale, deeply flawed, but absolutely vital for 1 billion human beings. But as we reflect on all this architecture, the PDS cards, the local ration shops, the village grain banks, I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own.
Okay, let's hear it.
Almost every single safety net we've talked about today is geographically anchored.
Right. Ahmad has to go to his specific ration shop in Bangalore.
Exactly. Ramu relies on his specific village. The grain bank serves its immediate local members. So what happens when climate change inevitably forces millions of people to migrate?
Oh, wow.
When rising sea levels or permanent droughts force a family to leave their home district, they leave their local ration registration behind. Their entire economic safety net evaporates the second they cross a border.
Because the entitlement doesn't travel with them.
Precisely. In an era of mass climate migration, how do we design an entitlement that travels seamlessly with the individual instead of being tied to a dying geography?
That is a staggering challenge. And it really shows that this complex labyrinth of food security we unpack today is still actively evolving. Yeah. The stakes really couldn't be higher.
They couldn't.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the true mechanics of human sustenance. We'll see you next time.